Welcome, age of vintage society. What do you think of when you hear the word Hollywood? When you think of Hollywood, you might think of Humphrey Bogart gazing into Ingrid Bergman's eyes in Casablanca. You might imagine Cary Grant tooling around the foothills in his 1929 Caddy, or Marilyn Monroe with her pouty lips and swirling white skirt in Some Like It Hot. No matter what comes to mind, the Hollywood sign stands sentinel over all of it. An icon that stands for the glamour, optimism and grandeur that has defined Hollywood since its creation. What is Hollywoodland? And why is it different from Hollywood? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. The history of the Hollywood sign. How does the sign endure the glamorous symbol for Hollywood? The iconic Hollywood sign has loomed over the epicenter of American movie making since 1923, and its almost 100-year history includes plenty of interesting tidbits. It's fitting that the Hollywood sign, the worldwide symbol of the entertainment industry, was conceived as an outdoor ad campaign for a suburban housing development called Hollywoodland. After all, despite the high profile of the film biz, real estate has always been Hollywood's primary economic driver. Although the sign's appearance and purpose have evolved over the years, its basic aspirational message remains the same. This is a place where magic is possible, where dreams can come true. Back then, the dream was a beautiful home and lifestyle. Today, the sign's promise is more subtle and can only be described as the parade of images, desires and ideas conjured by the word Hollywood. The first sign didn't say Hollywood. To advertise the Hollywoodland development, the sign was composed of 13 letters that spelled out the development's name, Hollywoodland. The last 4 letters of the sign wouldn't be dropped until 1949. The Hollywood sign wasn't created with the movies in mind. The sign wasn't created to advertise movies and starlets. It was created to advertise real estate. Developers S.H. Woodruff and Tracy E. Schultz began developing a new neighbourhood called Hollywoodland. The sign was meant to act as a huge billboard to draw new home buyers to the hillside. The Hollywood sign is almost 100 years old. The original Hollywood sign was constructed in 1923, the same year that Rin Tin Tin gained fame as a canine film star. Though it wasn't originally meant to be an icon for the film industry, the sign was created during the beginning of the glamorous, decadent golden age of Hollywood. In 1925, Ben-Hur was released with its record-breaking production budget of $3.95 million. The Hollywood sign is built as a huge illuminated advertisement for the upscale real estate development Hollywoodland. The sign was a very expensive billboard. The sign costs $21,000 and includes 13 50-foot high letters constructed of 3-foot by 9-foot panels and painted white. Using mule teams and tractors, the panels are hauled up Mount Lee and secured to frames constructed of pipes, wires and telephone poles. "4,000 20-watt light bulbs are mounted on the letters and spaced 8 inches apart. In late 1923 the sign is turned on and the result is dazzling. The developers expect the sign to last about a year. The sign became somewhat of a West Coast phenomenon and a tourist attraction. The sign endures and becomes a glorious symbol for Hollywood. Likewise, when did the Hollywood sign become such a big deal? An Englishman designed the Hollywood sign, Thomas Fiske Goff. The artist who created the Hollywood sign was born in London in 1890. He immigrated to the United States and settled in Los Angeles in the early 1920s and opened the Crescent Sign Company. Woodruff and Schultz commissioned Goff to create and install the sign. In addition to owning a sign company, Goff was an artist who painted landscapes on canvas. The sign had its very own caretaker. The real estate developers hired Albert Koth to act as caretaker. In addition to other responsibilities, Albert was in charge of the maintenance of the Hollywoodland sign. One of his jobs was to replace the light bulbs on the sign when they burnt out. A large task considering the number of bulbs and the height of each letter. The entire sign was replaced in 1978. By the 1970s, the Hollywood sign was looking every inch of its 50-plus years. An O had toppled down the hill, an L had been set on fire, and the other letters were falling apart. Hugh Hefner came to the rescue, holding a benefit gala where celebrities were able to purchase the new letters. Hefner himself bought the Y, Alice Cooper bought an O in honour of Groucho Marx, and Andy Williams sponsored the W. Other donors included Gene Autry, Warner Brothers Records, and Les Kelly of Kelly Blue Book. A playboy, a rocker and a singing cowboy saved the sign. The paint job in 1973 didn't last for long. 5 years later the sign looked worse than ever. The Chamber of Commerce determined that it needed a very expensive overhaul. Hugh Hefner held a fundraiser at the Playboy Mansion. Each of the 9 letters was auctioned for $28,000 to raise the needed renovation money. The benefactors for each letter were as follows: H. Terence Donnelly, a newspaper publisher. O. Alice Cooper, rock star. L. Les Kelly, businessman and creator of the Kelly Blue Book. L. Gene Autry, singer and actor. Y. Hugh Hefner, founder of Playboy magazine. W. Andy Williams, singer. O. Giovanni Mazza, Italian movie producer. O. Warner Brothers Studios. D. Thomas Pooley. The sign was hit by a car. You might not think that a sign perched on the side of a steep hill would be in danger of being hit by a car, but one night Albert Koth had a little too much to drink. He drove his 1928 Ford station wagon right off the cliff just above the sign. The car rolled down the hill, smashing into the H. Luckily Albert was okay, but both the Ford and the H were destroyed. The sign was almost torn down completely in 1949. In 1944, the city of Los Angeles purchased 455 acres from the Hollywoodland developers, including the land on which the Hollywood sign sat. The city didn't necessarily want a huge real estate billboard, but they let the sign sit there for another 5 years, until they decided to tear it down. But residents who had come to love the sign protested its removal. The city, along with the Chamber of Commerce, agreed to salvage it, with the understanding that they would remove the land from the end of the sign so that it represented the community, not a real estate development. They fixed the broken H and renovated the rest of the letters. The Hollywood sign was also the site of a suicide. Sadly, the allure of fame and fortune was not reality for many who flocked to Hollywood in hopes of becoming actors and actresses. One such unlucky girl, Peg Entwistle, left New York City and moved in with her uncle in Los Angeles while she tried to become a film star. Despite her efforts at stardom, Peg failed to land the big role she'd hoped for, and on September the 18th, 1932, she hiked up to the Hollywood sign, climbed a ladder to the top of the H, and jumped to her death. Howard Hughes once owned 138 acres surrounding the sign. In the 1940s, Hughes bought 138 acres of land surrounding the sign, intending to build a compound for himself and then girlfriend Ginger Rogers. Plans fell through after Rogers broke up with him, and the Hughes estate did nothing with the property for decades. When they finally sold it for $1.7 million in 2002, developers announced a plan to divide the estate into 5 luxury home sites. The Trust for Public Land raised money to purchase it from the developers for $12.5 million in 2010. The sign's previous rescuer, Hugh Hefner, chipped in $900,000. Not everyone loves the sign. Residents of Beechwood Canyon, which is where the original Hollywoodland housing development would have been, are none too happy about tourists trampling their neighbourhood in order to get to the Hollywood sign. They've put up illegal signs, painted curbs red to deter parking, and even installed a large "Tourists Go Away" sign nearby. But they've also taken high-tech masking measures by getting GPS directions to the sign changed on Google Maps, Apple Maps and Bing. How did a temporary advertisement for real estate come to epitomise the glossy fantasies of the silver screen? By its nature, cinema is the process of rendering the temporary and ethereal as permanent, everlasting. In this context, the history of medium's greatest geographical icon feels entirely appropriate. Torn between the sepia-tinted past and a brighter full-colour future, the Hollywood sign was essentially reconstructed as a monument to the old Hollywood. Much like the city it overlooks, it remains shrouded in myth and legend. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think? How the Hollywood sign became a monument to LA mythology?